It's a pleasure for me to introduce Salvador. He is a sociologist, a professor of sociology at the Universitat de Barcelona, and has been for many years, until 2013, the president of the Academy of Catalonia, which is the Institut d'Estudis Catalans. Salvador, thank you very much for giving us this occasion.
A pleasure.
And
my pleasure.
For allowing us to chat with you and to give some insights into both your biography and your academic, but also more personal career to young researchers. I would like to start at the very beginning.
Yes.
That means that I would like to ask you in the first place for your origins, where you come from, about your family, about friends, teachers, which may have given impulses to you, and would like to know what these were.
Yes. You want to know? I was born in Barcelona many years ago, in 1934, and my parents were school teachers. It must be said that I belong to a very important tradition in Spanish educational history, because they came from the Institución Libre de Enseñanza, which is a very important institution in Madrid, orientated towards enlightened thought, advanced educational techniques, and linked to republicanism, democracy, and progress. So they were the elite they belonged to the elite of the school teachers of the Republic, which it must be said that the Spanish Republic introduced not only a change of government and brought democracy to Spain, but also it represented an effort to modernize the country, and in every sense, starting with culture. So my parents were school teachers in the educational system, but belonged to a tradition which was very geared towards culture, education, and so on. So I had, from the beginning, I was surrounded by books and by a reverence towards culture. See, at home, importance of literature, of knowing what was going on in the world of science, or in the world of progress in general. They were obsessed by that. Not obsessed, but my sister and I, my sister was smaller than 2 years younger than me, we lived in a family, 4 of us. It wasn't an extended family, it was a small family. My parents had many friends in that kind of tradition, and my father had extraordinary friends, some of them exiled, who were professors. He was, as I said, a teacher, but he had friends. I don't want to do name dropping, but if I drop the names,
you can, of course.
He was friendly with people. Americo Castro, he came in and out of my house every time he came to Barcelona, and he's Javier Zubiri, been in my place. Carmen Castro, son of daughter of, was a very good friend of mine, of my parents, but me, when I went to Madrid, from the age of 17 or 18, I began to go to Madrid. I went to the Castro, to Zubiri's house, where they gave me supper, because the contacts were extraordinary. Don Americo also came frequently, to mention 2, but he had extraordinary friends. So these people were important for me because they were curious about my progress, and that was decisive later, especially before I went to America. But then my father, who was not particularly anti-clerical, or He was very Republican, but he had an idea, which I won't call obsessive, but he said, my son will not, my children, my daughter, they will never go. I remember, I was 8, 9, 10. I remember the phrase very seriously. You will not go to a school with priests or friars. In other words, you will not go to the Jesuits, which were very near my house, very near my home. But most children in Barcelona went to well-to-do families, or enlightened families went to schools like the Jesuits. No, I went to the Lycée Français. Lycée Français de Barcelona, which was important in Madrid and Barcelona. There were 2 lycées and the British school too. But in the Lycée Français, I was very lucky. When I did my baccalaureate from the age of 10, 11 till the age of 18, I was there. There was a section espagnole. I spoke French very fluently, but there was a section, a Spanish section, with a Spanish baccalaureate. We were very few. I remember in my year, there were about 7 or 8 people. Then we were about 20, at the end, again 7 or 8. 1 or 2 of them are friends of mine to this day. One of my best friends is a doctor who studied with me then. He's a very well-known doctor. So I went there. Before I had gone to the Escuela Tecnicolaria in Sarriá, which at least it was Catalanist, right-wing, lots of priests there, but no, it's not a school it was a few lay schools in Barcelona, although they took us to the Pedralbes monastery to do our first communion, but it was not the Catholic militancy, you didn't feel it. And then I went to a lay school, which was the Francoist authorities were never happy with the Lycée Français because they suspected they were communists, Freemasons, whatever, all sorts of lies. But the school was liberal, Republican, and some teachers, when you were 15, 14, 15, 16 years old, you could feel it, were Democrats. They didn't speak, they didn't give speeches, political speeches. But one of them was a professor of philosophy, you must know him, or of him, Gomá, Francesc Gomá. He taught me philosophy, and when I was 15, history of philosophy. You had studied a bit of Descartes, and a few notions about enlightenment, and basics about Kant, Hegel, and so, which a view very elementary, but you got a view. He taught these things. We had history of philosophy. He taught basic notions, and of course that really is crucial. And then I didn't know what to do. At the end, I wanted to go to university. I was doubting between philosophy. And all my best friends were in the philosophy department, faculty. But then I realized that I had tremendous pressures, even from my family, that with philosophy I would end up being a poor teacher in some institute, God knows where, that I had to do something. They put a lot of pressure on me, and I recognized, without any vocation, I studied law. I wanted to study economics too, but the Faculty of Economics hadn't been founded. In fact, it was created at the end of my career, at the end of my 5 years. But then the government forced them to start in Madrid. So I wouldn't have the resources to go to Madrid and to start when I had 80 or 90% of my courses passed. So I studied law without any enthusiasm, because I know I hated the idea of being a lawyer somewhere. But then it was a good mistake, because it could do other things, politics. I never had political ambitions, but I got involved in politics, when it's not the same thing. Because a few people get involved in politics without being a politician. Very few people, but I'm one of those. So I was in the first, second year. We created the Communist Party. I said created. See, it didn't exist anywhere, so we formed a little cell. We declared, 4 or 5 of us, we declared ourselves communists. We formed a little cell. So if you open books about the historical, about the students' democratic movement, and there I appear in most stories. A group of people who got together, 4 or 5 people, I can give you their names. Luis Goitisolo, one of them, is a famous writer. Octavio Pellicer is dead now. Soletura, myself, 4 or 5. One day in the coffee house we said, we are communists, and we created the party. And then after creating the party, we looked for links with the Communist Party. We established some connections with a teacher in Hostafrancs, in one area of Barcelona. And we knew that we were risking detention and torture. Because soon spies and so on informed the police who were the communists. I was arrested in the Villa Gitana, spent 2 nights there. I wasn't tortured, but they slapped my face a couple of times. And then came, from Germany came a gentleman who was a Stalinist and a madman. His name was Manuel Sacristan Luzon. He came and in question of 3 or 4 days told us we were deviationists. I don't know what deviation from what? Deviationists, dangerous petit bourgeois communists. And he proceeded to take over our little organization. And 3 or 4 days later, he called me privately and expelled me from the Communist Party. And I said, I have the honor to have been expelled from the Communist Party. I told him, but who are you? We decided. Who is we?
Yeah.
I have decided. I was expelled from the Communist Party. And then, I never denied that. It's funny because when I applied for a scholarship in the United States a few years later, the CIA should know that I was a communist. They didn't know. What they admitted me in the United States, I don't know. Because although I was a dissident, I never was or have been anti-communist. I am an anti-Stalinist. Every decent person should be anti-Stalinist. But anti-communist is a noble idea.
I was going to ask you about your experience.
And so I left the party.
In the US, but also, I mean, coming back to your family, I mean, you studied law because the family wanted you to study something decent,
well,
but then you became a communist.
No, I went to Germany, learned German, studied sociology there at Cologne, in the chair of Department of Professor André Koenig, who was my professor there. I'm member of the Koenig Gesellschaft, and I consider him one of my teachers. And then doing all sorts of jobs to earn a living. Then the scholarship I got a scholarship from the student union to pay for my fees. And I spent a year very badly because I didn't have a penny. I survived. But at the end of it, the American whatever it was, agency for students in Bonn, I went there with a Lambretta, and the girl who owned the Lambretta, but I was with the Lambretta, went to America House with K, America House, and I applied for a scholarship in the United States. And a lady there told me, all this is in German. You must improve your English immediately, but you must apply for a scholarship in Spain because you're a Spanish citizen. So I came to Barcelona, went to the Calle Diputación, there was some delegation of the American library. Now there's in the Via Augusta, America, somewhere, but then there was with a library, not bad, or was small, but I thought it was in lots of books. Talk to the people there. I want to go to America. How do I get the scholarship? I don't know. I waited for a few months, which I thought it was eternal. I thought they had forgotten me. And I got a letter, internal, at home, saying we are interviewing students. It was a Fulbright Commission. So I went there. I was asked, there were 3 gentlemen, plus 1 professor, a very famous man, by the way, Pericot, Professor Pericot, who was a famous man because a very eminent, the only Spaniard was him, was a Catalan, and he was a very eminent archaeologist of the Neolithic caves and things along the coast, Valencia coast. And I knew him. So they asked me lots of things. And they switched to English. I had been studying English in schools, academies, and so on. And I came from Germany because I had been a Cologne. My English was very funny. For instance, I was searching for words. For instance, to say but, I would say aber. It came out in German. They all laughed. And one of them, I don't remember, sort of very avuncularly said, look, my dear boy, don't worry, you pick up your English if you get this scholarship. So about about 100 people applied through Bilbao, Seville, Barcelona, and Madrid, the places where they were consular, to go to America, but 15 were selected.
But I mean, eventually you stayed for
no, I
more
was
than
selected.
20 years
I was
in
selected very
English-speaking
simply
countries.
for something. Many people were in history, literature, but the selected ones were 2 or 3 were selected because they wanted to study American literature. So the commission thought, oh, American literature, that's good. Mind you, the Franco-American, the treaty 53 between America, USA, and the fascist regime in Spain had been signed. I sarcastically think sometimes or say, fruit of that, if America hadn't signed this treaty with the fascist regime, which I hated, but there was a clause saying there would be cultural, well, no, there was a base for the Americans in Moron in Seville, and there was sort of army and sort of some sort of treaty to fight the dangerous Soviets, but there was a cultural clause that there would be exchanges between America and Spain, and America offered scholarships. There was an agency in Madrid, in the Biblioteca Nacional, on the last floor, which was a small office, which dealt with the Spaniards going to America. So, of these 50 people, 15 were selected. They called us in Madrid. I got the train, El Rápido, all day the train. I went, El Rápido was the slow one. So I met these people in this floor, and they told us, you have got a Fulbright scholarship. Later, I would discover this was extremely important, Fulbright. So I was a Fulbrighter. Not a bullfighter, a Fulbrighter. Being Spanish. Okay, a few months later, I had to go back to Barcelona. I got a letter or two, and then finally a letter saying, on the 20th of July, we all leave for America.
I mean,
I went to Madrid, and this is interesting. We were sent to the USA on board a ship. The last lot that went, not in one of the super Constellation planes. We went to Algeciras all night, sleeping in a train, and in the morning, a ship, the U.S. Constitution, from magnificent ship, came from Italy, stopped in Algeciras, next to Gibraltar. We went on a boat. We went aboard, went up, we crossed the sea. I hear that we were the last people that went by boat. From then on the next year, yeah, everybody went with a scholarship to America, went by plane. So, I know this is like in a film, but it is true. I spent 5 days on board. I saw the appearance of he crossed the captain ordered the ship to cross the Azores because there was a new island being formed. We could see the sea bubbles, then columns of smoke, and the beginning, the tip of a new island. And actually, it was natural, of course, in every papers in the world, a new small island was appearing. So we saw it. 3 days later, we went to New York, and I suppose I'm sure, the captain forced the ship to enter the harbor of New York, the port of New York, at 5:36 in the morning. It was full of Italians who were going to America, plus these 15 Spaniards. We all there saw the Statue of Liberty, and then, of course, he did it because it's the entry to the port of New York that you see in movies, you read in novels, and I saw the Statue of Liberty, but of course he was very conscious of it, and so we saw it in the very early morning. We saw the entrance to New York, which is so beautiful. I wasn't in tears, but I thought this was an extraordinary event. And then I went down. They asked me a few questions. They thought I was carrying dangerous drugs because I had a ton of cabello de ángel. I don't know how you say that in English. Angel's hair, which is my mother had given me. And I said, well, I can eat it in front of you. So I put a spoon and ate it. I said, this isn't harmless. This was a chap in the entrance who was a customs officer.
I mean, once you arrived...
And then they sent me to Yale. I chose a university. I could have chosen, this is crazy, Harvard, Yale, or I don't know what, for the summer. But I could stay. I filled the papers. I thought Yale sounded more interesting. So I spent 3 months in Yale. But at Yale, there was a man who asked me, do you want to stay? Do you want to go and study sociology there? And by then I knew that the most important department of sociology in the world, that was the way of putting it, was Chicago.
So you went there.
And he said, would you like to stay at Yale? Yale had a professor whom later I met him, very nice man, small department. Harvard, so-so, with a very famous sociologist there, doing more sociological theory, history of ideas than anything, but the great department in the world, admired everywhere, Chicago. They tell me, well, you want to go to Chicago? We'll apply, see if you go. But it's difficult, you make your work, you will have to study statistics. But I wanted to go to Chicago. It was the most. And at the end, I got a train ticket, which then I saw the timetable and was absurd, so I took a bus, a Greyhound bus like everybody else. I went to Chicago. I went to university, the main office. I'm so-and-so. I'm a Fulbrighter. I got a Fulbright scholarship. Yes. I feel good. They assigned me to International House, which is still now a beautiful, magnificent residence for students, called International House, founded by Rockefeller more or less when the university was founded, end of the 19th century. Very good residence, where I spent a few months. And I came back a couple of times, but then I lived nearly 5 years in apartments, flats, we would say in English, with other students. I spent 5 years in Chicago doing my master's and my PhD in Chicago. I'm a doctor of the University of Chicago. in sociology, no less. And it's exquisite. We think we are the cream of the cream.
But then you stayed
And
for
we are.
more than 20 years in English-speaking
No, I
countries.
spent 24 years in England.
24 years,
No,
more
and then
than
I
20
spent
English-speaking
my
countries.
4 years in Chicago, which were the best years of my life. Studying, singing, lots of singing. The girls were very attractive, and I couldn't resist. And I spent, and at the end I could have renewed it, but then my supervisor, the PhD supervisor, was a professor of Chicago. I had then the most fantastic professors I've had in my life, and I spoke like I talk to you. I mean, people who received me privately. Hayek, I'm not a Hayekian, but of course, he taught me. I have to present a couple of papers to him. Strauss, I did a course on Aristotle with him. And Strauss gave me one of the greatest lessons I've given in my life. I will tell you what. Strauss, because I was the first term, I studied with Strauss, basic, the Hobbes and a few other. He has a small book on Hobbes, marvelous, by the way, which I bought it, I have it at home. Then Hayek, and then this man, Edward Shields, one of the best sociologists, then took me under his, say, okay, I'll direct it. He supervised my PhD thesis. I got an MA by examination. I could, not by thesis, by exam. The exam lasted 3 days, but this is the Chicago style. They'll lock you up in a room with all the books, the chuletas we say. You can bring all the stuff they ask you big questions, like migrations in the West. Compare Marx to Auguste Comte. Describe and compare and give papers. You wrote long papers. Things like that. And you have to reply to these days. They would lock you up in the room, and in the end they will give you. And I got a good degree. It was exactly the final. It was not a figure like on 10 or a 9 or an 8. No, you could get a fail, a pass, or a high pass. I don't know what happened. This is the Chicago style in the Committee on Social Thought. And that was examined, I suppose, by Hannah Arendt, Edward Shields, Friedrich Hayek. They were the committee. Arendt, I had followed her courses. We were about 25 people. I have written things on Hannah Arendt, and mentioned the fact that I am the only disciple of Hannah Arendt. There are Arendtian people who know much more than me. Here in Barcelona, there are 2 or 3 experts on Hannah Arendt. But I have the good fortune that I took courses with her.
And
in fact, I took one course.
Why after so many years in the US and then the UK did you come back? Was it this sense of belonging?
Because this can only be explained by being crazy. Because I then came here. I spent a year. My professor went to King's College.
In 89 or 88, 89, you came back, right?
No, I came, and when I came in 64, 65, I spent a year here. He was at King's. He had a double chair, one in Chicago and one in King's. And he said, why come here? What do you do in Barcelona? I was progressing with my PhD. I sent him a copy, and he said it was rubbish, you are very slow, come here and finish it here. So I went to King's, and Lord Annan, who was the provost title, medieval title, of the college, received me in his room, And he said, look, we'll give you, my scholarship didn't cover anything, but he gave me the privilege of sitting, and lunching and eating and all that in the college. By the way, in the high table where the professors brought, because all the PhD students would sit on a high table. And then he gave me, for 1 year, but I spent 3 or 4, he gave me rights to stay in the college, to sleep there. Actually, I never did, for a simple reason, although I took showers and baths there, which were very important for me, because the college was full. But they had houses outside in the college, in a place called Shelley Road, Shelley, el poet. Shelley Road was a small street which belonged, near all the houses belonged to kings. So I got a flat there. I had to share it with 2 other students. And I was very happy finishing my PhD. But then I got a job at Reading University. It was advertised. I didn't know, but like everything, this professor said, "Look here, what the hell are you here? Finished? There is a job as a lecturer, assistant lecturer." So I went to Reading. I had an interview with a couple of people, the dean of the faculty, professor of political science, and one sociologist and somebody in history, Italian history. Luigi Meneghello, they became a good friend of mine, an eminent writer, by the way. So they asked me a few questions, and they gave me a job with very little, I had less than £90 a month, which I more or less lived. Then I got married, and we couldn't live with £90. We needed 200, 300 pounds. But they renewed my job, my teaching lectureship, young lecturer, and I stayed 4 or 5 years. I renewed the permission. Then I got from there I got a job in Lancaster. I simply got jobs.
With so many rich experiences,
the first one.
Let me just ask a final question.
Yeah.
What would you say if your grandson, your great-grandson or nephew comes now to you and says, "Look, I would like to go into research"? Would you be happy
to teach?
as
No,
a
I think
grandfather?
that
Or
you should go into business, but not the teaching. You're going to be poor all your life, and academic life is what it is. And I don't know, it's very...
But if he has the strong desire to do research, what would your recommendations be?
Wonderful. I think research is fantastic.
And what recommendations could you give him or her, or also young researchers
to do what
in general?
No, I think there's nothing better than that. I mean, there's nothing more noble than science. I mean, it's marvelous. I'd say yes all the time. In my case, I became a sociologist, but I became so involved in the history of ideas that I was interested in the history of sociology. My thesis on the idea of mass society, the massification as it horrible world of the world, is basically a history of ideas, thesis of evolution so the evolution of, starting with Tocqueville, is a theories of democracy, of mass democracy, and the whole thing was historical. And I became so engrossed in the history of ideas that at a certain time, foolishly, I decided to write a history of the social thought. Why? Well, I had read Machiavelli, Florentine history, not only the usual thing. I had read Rousseau. I simply devoured Rousseau, Machiavelli. Tocqueville I read at a very early stage when no merit in this, but in this country, in Spain, nobody knew who he was. I was reading Machiavelli more than Marx. I read some Marx, but it's boring. Marx is very boring, turgid.
Yeah.
But these other thinkers I read. Some I didn't like, still Dilthey, all these kind of German woolly writers, and I read and read.
So your recommendation is basically reading.
Reading, when I think if you, the best thing the best way to learn anything is to write a book about it. If you write the book, and I wrote the history of social thought. Well, I've been lucky. It's 13, no less than 13 editions have appeared, and every 4 or 5 years I've renewed it. In 1981, for instance, I had a scholarship, by the way, to Yale, although I had to spend only 3 weeks there, 3 months. But I was invited by Yale, one sabbatical, and I went there with my wife and my children. 1981, my children were small. And I, for instance, spent the whole year polishing the second or the third edition of Historia del Pensamiento Social.
Yeah, but you know that unfortunately today for young researchers there's no time for writing books because
No.
you're supposed to publish high impact papers
I don't know,
one
but
after the other.
I used
What
to
do you
read,
think about
I
that?
read. You see, I read Tocqueville, and I usually, when I write, I'm not a specialist, but I write on people I read. Even Ortega said, I don't like Ortega, but if I have to speak of the Revolt of the Masses or España Invertebrada, I read those books. Hippolyte or Durkheim, or those great thinkers, I'm interested, and to this day I like that kind of stuff. Benedetto Croce, Cattaneo, I read Italian thinkers. I'm a great admirer of Italian culture. So I read them and underline those books. They are all underlined and with notes, but doesn't make me a scholar of anything. Because I met people at Reading, for instance, I remember, who were specialists on one thinker, or two, or one school, and really knew much more than me. But I had the aplomb, the cheek, call it what you like, to write a huge book, History of Social Thought. Of course, I read the Plato's Republic. Afterwards, the best edition is Jowett's edition I have at home, marvelous. But I have other Confront. I have 2 or 3 Confront's translation. It's very good. I have some books like the Republic. I must have read it 3 or 4 times. But I know the Statesman, El Politico, read once, and I had enough. So it's very uneven. Some writers I know very well, some thinkers, others not so much. And I simply published this book, and then monographs and things. But my image, public image in university, was that I was a sociologist. Even I wrote an introduction to sociology, which with effort to make it well balanced, unbiased. It's not a Marxist book, it's not a functionalist book, it's not any school, it's just even. And I was surprised because this book was translated into French. It had 3 editions in France, 4 or 5 in America and England, 2 in Scandinavian countries, 1 in Japan. In Italy, 4. I never got a penny from Italy because they are a bunch of crooks. It sold very well in Italy. I know that, for instance, La Sapienza in Rome, it was a textbook. Well, dove sono I quattrini? No? They never paid. Never. And here, occasionally, Edición 102, who has the rights for Spanish, Catalan, what have you, occasionally gave me some little money. They said, "Here, look, 20,000 pesetas with royalties."
I think that's a fate and a
Fantastic.
concern that you share
So I
with
had
young
I
researchers
could
also.
drink a coffee out of my books, but that was very successful. Sociology was successful, sold like hotcakes everywhere, in Spain, America, Latin America. In some places, well, the same thing happened to History of Social Thought. In the Dominican Republic, simply they photocopied it, it multiplied, and they sold it over America, Latin America, without copyrights, without royalties, nothing. Pirates, they are pirates.
Salvador, I think we have to thank you very much for sharing all these personal memories of life, which is dedicated to research. Thank you very much for being here with us.
Funnily enough, I've done some sociological research, macro sociology. Well, it's like economics, microeconomics and microeconomics. I've done macro for Europe, 2 or 3 books published by Rogers and Keegan Paul on European societies. Here in Catalonia, I've done some big research projects, questionnaires or whatever. One of the books on Catalonia is huge, 4 kilos and 2,200 grams, with a team of people, sociologists from Barcelona, a team, 3 or 4 or 5 people, but about 12 writers. Each one wrote a chapter. I have the book here, so I don't bring it to you, it doesn't matter. It's
later
next room to the right, you can see it. And I want to do that again. But I am split between research, macro sociology. Micro doesn't interest me. Small question is, I think micro sociology is very interesting. You can do sociology of a school or a neighborhood, but I've done these macro things, which is also as justifiable as the other. And in parallel, I have this weakness for history of ideas. That's what I. And the rest of my life, suppose I live 3 minutes or 3 months or 20 years, I don't know. If I'm all right, I continue to do that.
We hope that you still can contribute a lot to science.
No, and occasionally I write the odd essay, non-historical. I just finished one on rationality. Finished yesterday. Literally, no, I've revised it. Well,
so research.
It's got 20 pages.
And
I sent it to a journal in Madrid. Occasionally,
Now they have to peer review it. We'll see what comes out of that.
No,
Salvador, muchas gracias.
Well, yes.